Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Don Stevens. This is a ceremonial session of the Superior Court of Lake County. It's convened to honor and pay tribute to 6 members of the Lake County Bar who passed away recently. As most of you may know, Courtroom 10C is being renovated, and this is Courtroom 3B is actually the largest courtroom in this building, which is yet another reason why we need a new courthouse. And hopefully that muddy hole over there next door eventually will be the new Wake County Courthouse. And we have designed at least one courtroom that will be appropriate for a ceremonial courtroom that will accommodate several hundred people. So we appreciate your patience, and we'll make do with what we have until that day comes. We want to thank the Wake County Bar Association for sponsoring this event. When I previously presided at these proceedings, I have begun by reciting an inscription that appears in the North Carolina Bar Association's annual memorial notice of deceased members, because the words in that inscription are very simple, but they seem to convey the essence of why we gather here today, so I'll read them to you now. They read as follows: "Grieve not, nor speak of me with tears, but laugh and talk of me as if I were here beside you." I say again, grieve not, nor speak of me with tears, but laugh and talk of me as if I were here beside you. That's why we gather here today, laugh and talk of those 6 lawyers as if they were here beside us, because they are. They are ever present in our memories that do not die. My dear friend and fellow lawyer, Webb, who passed away several months ago, at his memorial service, passed out a pamphlet, his family did, that recited one of his favorite poems, and I have recited it before on the occasion of these services, but it seemed appropriate to share it again once more to you. The poem reads as follows: "Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you waken in morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there, I did not die." We gather today to honor the lives and memory of 6 lawyers whose memories have not died. Each attorney was unique in his and her own special way. We come to pay tribute to them, to remember them in a very public way, to bear witness to how we have been diminished by their deaths, and at the same time to share how we have been so greatly enriched by their lives. This is not a sad occasion, and it's not meant to be a sad occasion. On the contrary, this is a special time to reflect and to enjoy those special memories and special thoughts. It truly is a time to talk to them as if they were here beside us. We very much appreciate the presence of the High Sheriff, Johnny Harrison. We thank him for his excellent service to the people of Lake County, and for his outstanding relationship with the court system and with our bar. Thank you, Sheriff Harrison, for being here and opening court for us. It's a rare occasion when the High Sheriff of any county opens Superior Court these days. At this time, I recognize 2 presidents of our bar: Ed Gaskins, president of the Bar Association, and Doug Rocker, president of our 10th Judicial District Bar, remarks, and I'll let those fellows decide who remarks first.
Thank you, Judge Stevens. On behalf of the 10th Judicial District Bar, I want to welcome all of you here and tell you that we appreciate you coming. For those family and friends and other members of the bar who have not been to one of these ceremonies before, I think you're in for a treat. They really are very well done, and I think you'll find that they do great honor and respect to the people that we're here to celebrate. I also wanted to, it's really a good experience in terms of both the more seasoned, experienced members of the bar, because it's an opportunity to come out and remember the folks that were being honored and remember all the great experiences you had with them. But it's also a great opportunity for younger members and family to learn a little bit about the bar and how it has operated over the years. I think it really has become, these ceremonies that are now twice a year because our bar is increasing in size, have really become something that a lot of members of the bar look forward to coming twice a year. And I want to make sure that I recognize there's a lot of work that goes into putting these ceremonies together and having them come off as well as they do. And so before we get started, I just want to ask that there's a committee of the 10th Judicial District Bar who organizes and does all the work necessary. And I just ask the members of that committee just to stand briefly just so we can recognize you for that service. And particularly today, I wanted to recognize two members, or the two people who have been the most responsible for that, particularly over the last 10 years. Leonard Jernigan is the chair of the Memorials Committee. He has been the chair for 10 years, possibly 10 plus years. And his assistant, Betty Jo Creed. Betty Jo, if you stand just for a second, they really are the folks who have done outstanding work and really are responsible for these programs. Unfortunately, this is the last ceremony that they'll be coordinating and making sure they run off smoothly. And so I wanted to particularly recognize them and express our appreciation for them doing that. And since I know no one came here to hear me talk, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Co-President Ed Gaskins. Thank you.
Please report. Fellow members of the bar, honored guests, we're delighted to have you here today. One of the attorneys said to me, Ed, I didn't know that you were the bar president. And I said, well, some folks have tried to keep it a secret and others refuse to acknowledge it. Nevertheless, I really am the bar president. It's my privilege to be here today. We think that this committee performs a very important function. And that is primarily to let family and friends of these lawyers understand something of what they did in their professional life in the place where they did it, and to be honored by the colleagues with whom they practiced. And likewise, we think it's important for those of us who knew them as lawyers to have the opportunity to meet the family and friends and to understand something about our colleagues in terms of their personal life as well as their professional. And so we're delighted to have you here today to honor and enjoy the colleagues both as family and friends and lawyers. Thank you for being here.
Robert McMillan is a native of Raleigh, well known around here, of course. He was admitted to the bar in 1949 after graduating from Webb University and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He was the first recipient of the Joseph Branch Professionalism Award, and he is speaking in memory of Spencer Merrill.
Please go, ladies and gentlemen. I will read my remarks due to the fact that time is limited. Also, I want to make sure I say everything I want to say. But primarily because if I were not to read remarks and if I were to speak extemporaneously, I would become too emotional, I would go too long, and neither of which would be appropriate. So here are my remarks. H. Spencer Barrow. Spencer Barrow was born in April of 1945 and grew up in a hospital. As a young man growing up, he had a well-rounded career marked by remarkable athletic prowess. He had to abandon his dreams of athletics due to serious injuries, but he went on to graduate from the University of North Carolina and law school of Wake Forest. Following graduation from law school, Spencer enjoyed what many consider to be the experience of a lifetime. That is, law clerk to Justice Carlisle Higgins of the State Supreme Court. Since then, he was to follow a career as a practicing attorney until his recent untimely death. He earned and enjoyed the highest levels of esteem from the bench, from the bar, and from the public. It is interesting that the notice of his death made mention of the fact that he was beloved as an employer and as a friend. To those of us who knew him, this was appropriate, since he was indeed beloved by family, by peers, by employees, by friends, and by all with whom he came in contact. He was a community leader in business and in philanthropic activities, especially in those activities serving the blind. Please bear with me while I recount some of my personal experiences with Spencer. Early one night in March of 1976, a man called me from Rex Hospital advising me that my friend Carl Churchill was in intensive care at the hospital following a heart attack. I hurried to see if there were anything that I could do to help. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Carl was dead. For about 15 years, Carl and I had become the very closest of friends, growing out of our experiences of trying cases with one another and against one another. It was a joy to be with him. It was a joy to be against him, outside of court or in court. Outside of court and in court, our relationship was just as strong and the fun was just as intense. A young lawyer named Spencer Barrow, whom I knew only slightly, had placed that call to me that night. In retrospect, it has seemed to me that fate decreed that it should have been Spencer who did place that call. The reason I say this is that Spencer was so much like Carl. Personally and professionally, Spencer and I developed a relationship very similar to the relationship that I had enjoyed so long with Carl. Professionally, Spencer, like Carl, was a staunch advocate, a reliable ally, and an awesome adversary. As a friend, it was a joy to know him. Spencer had remarkable rapport with persons from all walks and facets of life. Though he was brilliant in his ability to cross-examine prosecuting witnesses, including police officers, law enforcement officers invariably called him their friend. He was their friend, though frequently their adversary. Carl, too, had this gift of easy rapport and trust with persons from all classes. Spencer's empathy extended to persons from all levels of society. One anecdote that comes to light immediately after his death illustrates this so completely. On Monday following his death, Mrs. Gonzalez of the Mecca restaurant delivered to George Curran, one of Spencer's partners, an envelope containing money that was due to Spencer. This was changed from Spencer's anonymous gift of Friday before his death, paying in advance for lunches of 2 employees of the office of the clerk of the court, whom Spencer had seen come to the Mecca. They were unaware of this largesse. Acts of kindness and generosity of this nature graced Spencer's life at all times and at all turns. Generous to a fault, you ask? Spencer's answer would be no. He believed and acted out this belief that to those to whom much has been given, much will be required, and in Spencer's case, gladly shared. This beneficent heart was much like that of Carl Churchill's. Like Carl in another way, Spencer was an outstanding trial lawyer and a wise counselor. His sound judgment helped many of his clients in stormy business waters. In trial work, he was a strong advocate who had that essential talent to know when to go full speed ahead and when to fold. He and I used to laugh with the awareness that, quote, any fool can bluster through a case with a not guilty plea, quote, but it takes a lawyer to know when to fold. As a trial lawyer, Spencer was also always thoroughly prepared. This fact was the key to his remarkable success. He was able to obtain what seemed to be more than his share of not guilty verdicts from jurors and favorable plea bargains and dismissals from the prosecutor's office. But there was no mystery about this. Hard work and thorough preparation were the keys. A case in point was one in which he asked me to assist him. One facet of the case involved the exact location of a footpath through an undeveloped portion of a subdivision. To me, a footpath was a footpath, and the location was obvious. Spencer, though, wanted more detail. He took it upon himself to employ an aerial photographer to obtain shots of the locale from several angles. He was just as meticulous with other aspects of the case. He and I and our client went into court awaiting trial. In due course, we were advised that the prosecutor was taking a dismissal. Certain defects in the case had been brought to light by virtue of Spencer's diligence. Onlookers thought it was luck. How wrong they were. It was due to Spencer's penchant for hard work and diligence. My son Duncan had an experience on the Monday following Spencer's untimely death that illustrates the caliber of service rendered by Spencer to his clients. David Godfrey, not knowing that Spencer had died, spoke to Duncan in the courthouse that Monday morning and asked Duncan to tell Spencer when he next saw him how pleased David's clients were with the services that Spencer had rendered that very week in the case which David had referred to Spencer. The more I thought about Spencer while preparing these remarks, the more astounded I became with the similarities between Carl and Spencer. I had not known Spencer well at the time he called me about Carl's illness. That tragic event drew me and Spencer closer and closer together over the years. It finally dawned upon me that these two men grew up in that same northeastern province of North Carolina, lying to the north and east of Roanoke River, inclining more towards Norfolk than towards Raleigh. Their similarities were in their bones. It is a breeding ground of clannish, good people with unique lawyering skills. They all know one another. They are like one another. They are loyal to one another and treasure their common heritage. Their lawyers are the stuff of legend. R. Hunt Parker, Julian Alsbrook, Lunsford Crew, Carl Churchill, Spencer Barrow, Nicholas Long, Dwight Cranford, Whit Powell, Joseph Branch, John R. Jordan Jr., Joe Parker, Thad Ewell, J. William Copeland, J.C.B. Ehrenhaus, W.H. Bergwin, Jr. and Sr., and who can forget A. Pilston, Godwin, and Hathaway Cross. They are a special breed. Spencer Barrow and Carl Churchill are among the best of that breed. Spencer had a wonderful sense of humor. I enjoyed laughing with him. I enjoyed laughing at him. I enjoyed having him laugh at me. Share with me two anecdotes. Spencer called upon me one time to defend one of his clients' co-defendants. It was a despicable case. Our clients had fired into a passing automobile late one stormy night when their car had broken down. Spencer referred the worst case to me, he thought. When the case came on to trial, the chief state's witness testified to terrible things about Spencer's client. She then looked at me and at my client and said, before I had said anything, that man sitting by that red-headed lawyer won't even there. You all are trying to trick me. At least I had sense enough not to cross-examine that witness. Spencer's client went to jail. My client, due to my brilliant trial technique, walked. Spencer, in due course, laughed. I laughed immediately. My favorite among many, his sons are here. This is on them. Years ago, his three boys wanted to go duck into something on the eastern shore. It was all the rage among the cool set of boys ages 12 to 15. Spencer pointed out to them that it was too expensive. They implored him with pleas of being willing to give up Christmas if he would only take them money. He did. With 3 days of cold, chill, windy, icy, nothingness behind them, they headed home. The gloom was finally broken somewhere down the road with this question, quote, "Daddy, is this all the Santa Claus we're going to get this year?" End quote. I have it from a good source that each one got 2 tangerines and 4 Brazil nuts unbroken. While I was a good many years his elder, there was a remarkable chemistry flowing between me and Spencer. There was always a boost to my spirits when I met him in the courthouse, at the post office, on the street, or anywhere else. His greetings of inquiry were always sincere with no veneer. When he asked, "How are you?" he wanted to know. When he said, "I hope you're well," he meant it. When he smiled or laughed, you felt genuine warmth. His laugh was genuine. His greeting was from the heart. He was loving and he was lovable. His wife and family know exactly what I mean when I describe these characteristics and traits. Charm, love, empathy, warmth, good humor just oozed from this man. We welcome his wife, his sons, and members of the extended family today. It is mysterious that this man who called me about Carl's condition should have so nearly replaced Carl in my life. I can pay no higher tribute to Spencer than to say that he was like Carl Churchill. I can pay no higher tribute to Carl Churchill than to say he was like Spencer Barrow. Thank you.
It is a real special honor to be able to participate in this memorial service to my longtime friend, Heman Clark, and honor him as a man that it was unique. As a matter of fact, I used to call him the Renaissance lawyer because he participated in so many phases of the law. I knew him when we both were at law school. He was in the class of 40 and I was a class of 41. And as a matter of fact, most everybody knew me because I was the only woman in my class. So it was easy, but I also knew Heman because he had been a graduate of Davidson College, and I was a graduate of Aggie Scott College. We knew lots of folks together, but actually, you see, I knew early on that Heman was a man of really fine humor. One day he stopped me in the halls in Chapelville and said, "Guess what? As you know, I'm rooming with those 3 other guys out there at Acacia Cottage, and guess what? One of them brought a duck back from Easter." And he says, "You know, we've named that duck Excuse Me." So Excuse Me evidently got on the nerves of folks with too many excuses. And one day he says, "We're inviting you to dinner. We're having tame duck and wild rice." So we had a wonderful time. He always had that great sense of humor. And I called him a Renaissance lawyer because I knew him when he was such a great friend of ours as a law student. And actually, he was the president of his class, and so he started out doing good. And then he was, not only was he knew him in law school, but also we separated because both he and I and my husband were involved in World War II, and he was then a post-judge advocate, so he went into another phase. So I also knew him as a law student. I knew him as a past member of the military. I also knew him as a member of the judiciary, as a practicing lawyer, as a member of the judiciary, and ultimately what I call a member of the executive branch, judicial branch, executive branch, And finally, he was a member of the legislative branch, being a member of the government relations group. But I'll go back and tell you that all along the way, he was, well, whatever he went into, he did a great job. He first, when he came back from World War II, he went into practice with his father, J. Bayard Clark, who was had been 20 years in Congress. And they did a great job of practice, but in 1958, Governor Hodges appointed Heman as Superior Court Judge, and then he was elected and served until 1963, when he decided to step down from the judiciary and go back to Fayetteville, where he served as Cumberland County Attorney for 20 years and was named Outstanding County Attorney by the Association of County Attorneys. He also was recognized by the bar as an award for a general practitioner. And then Heman and his first wife, Mary Reed Harris, were active in mental health reform all through there in Cumberland County. Did a great job, and was compassionate as usual. Great compassionate guy. And it was his wife of 40 years had an unexpected death in 1982. And then Governor Jim Holt called Heman to public service as Secretary of Crime Control and Public Safety. So I was concurrently in the legislature, and he did a wonderful job there in the executive branch. As a matter of fact, I thought he did a great job, but he did one thing that kind of bugged me, and I kid him about it. He started this unmarked patrol car thing. I thought that was pretty sneaky. But he did a tremendous job as Secretary of Crime Control and Public Safety. And he did need that unmarked car. He insisted for public safety. I did chide about it a lot. In 1984, Heman joined the law firm of Sanford, Adams, McCullough, and Meador, where his primary focus was with the government relations group. And of course, then I saw him practically every day, meaning that he was there on duty all the time, and letting me know what laws were the good laws and what laws were the bad laws. Was there, he was very closely connected with the legislative branch. Don't know how many lawyers have been there with the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branches. So he was, what I still say, a Renaissance lawyer. It was there that Heman married Mary Jane Etheridge in 1991 after working with her on a judicial campaign. With his usual humor, he said, the best thing that I ever got out of politics was Mary Jane. And I can tell you that. Mary Jane's been wonderful and a good friend. And he was always involved in politics. And of course, I was always involved in politics. So that we were very attuned to the same sort of rapport with that. And he, at one time, was chair of the Democratic Party in Cumberland County and always worked on the judicial campaigns where he met Mary Jane. And actually, we never ran out of political talk. It was just fun for both of us. And as I say, all through our friendship, I've known him as a person of compassion and of understanding and a belief in people. It was absolutely a wonderful person to know and to be close with, and we understood each other. He spent so much of his life in justice and in public service, which I think is terrific. Each one of his phases that he went through, I can say, with a great sense of humor, with a great sense of compassion, and he was absolutely the personification of a true Southern gentleman. Always. Thank you for letting me speak for him.
Amar Majmundar is a native of India, although he moved here when he was 6 months old, so he's been most of the time. He's a graduate of the University of Rochester and Brooklyn Law School, moved to North Carolina in 1996, and is with the Attorney General's office. And give us a speak in memory of our Gendy.
I didn't actually tell Leonard all that stuff. For the word that he's stalking me. Good afternoon. My name is Amar. I've been asked to speak a few words on behalf of Gendy in her honor. I'm not sure I can be as entertaining as the previous speakers, and I'm certainly not as distinguished. But I think Laura was. She deserves a few words in her memory. I met her about 7 years ago. She came to interview for a position in the tort claims section. And I remember the interview pretty well. It was at the end of the day, it was at the end of a long week. And I had spent the day being beaten down and beaten up by plaintiffs' lawyers and disgruntled taxpayers and ornery judges. Frankly, the last thing I wanted to do was conduct an interview with some eager, brimming with vigor kid who was out to rescue me from certain legal doom. And Laura was all that. But she was more. My initial impression of Laura was that she was really remarkably awake. She flashed an enormous bright smile. She leaned in to hear everything that was being said. And she made so much eye contact it actually made me a little bit afraid. And she took feverish, mad scientist notes. And you could tell she really, really wanted the job. And trust me when I tell you, it was an awful job. It was a terrible job. And I told her during the interview, this is a really bad job. Are you sure you want it? She did. She wouldn't be dissuaded. And she wouldn't be denied. And she made a hell of an impression. Of course, she didn't get the job. Somebody else got the job. And despite that setback, she remained undeterred, and she applied and got the next vacant position, much to our benefit. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Gendy are here in the courtroom today, and they know, those who knew Laura now, that if nothing else, she was stubbornly determined. She knew what she wanted, and she relentlessly pursued it until she met her goals. And in doing so, she displayed an uncanny ability to make the best out of really poor situations, poor circumstances. For instance, poor Laura had to do her undergrad work at Carolina. Now, to most of us, that doesn't sound so bad. But for Laura, it was excruciating. For her to get a degree from that fine, fine institution while harboring a pure, vicious hatred for its basketball team. It was pure hatred. It burned with the intensity of about 10,000 suns. And it was matched only by her love for that lesser team down the road in Durham. But she persevered. In 1996, she got her BA. And she again displayed her stick-to-itiveness in 2000 when she got her JD from Wake Forest. Although now Duke, somewhat less contemptible, I think. She made good use of that degree first with the Honorable Clarence Horton. And then later on with the Honorable Douglas McCullough, she served as a clerk in the Court of Appeals. And although she was rather small in physical stature, it's my understanding at least, that she played a big part in ensuring the high quality of opinions emanating from the court. And then she brought those skills to our section. And for most of that time, I supervised Laura. And truth be told, I'm using the term supervise pretty loosely. In reality, she probably did more to supervise me than I did her. And that's the way she was. She kept us all grounded, even keeled. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but sometimes lawyers tend to be self-absorbed, egocentric. Laura would have any of that. With a calm and reassuring word, she kept us focused. She kept us together. She was, in the end, our gravity. And in her own right, she was an excellent lawyer. She was smart, precise, she was principled, she was humane, something a lot of lawyers don't. She was a better lawyer than I'll ever be. And I remember I had a pretty important brief due to the Supreme Court, and Laura helped me write it. Literally, she sat behind me, kind of like today. And she watched every word I typed in. She offered advice and suggestions. She usually began by suggesting that perhaps I should remove at least most of the profanity from the brief. It got to the point that the brief was due, and I was still making wholesale edits. And for days, Laura sat behind me, suffering. And with every keystroke, I could hear her hold her breath or cringe or look away in horror. And she went through the emotional gauntlet. She willed me through every grammatical disaster, every blue book tragedy. And the thing is, she didn't do it for herself. Her name was never on that brief. She did it for me. She did it to make me a better lawyer. And every time I sit down to write a brief or a memo or an email or a grocery list, I think of Laura, and I try a little bit harder. She's still making me a better lawyer. And in contrast, I did everything I could to show her that the practice of law was not necessarily the practice of life. So every day when I had enough of the office, about 3 o'clock or so, I would go and literally demand that Laura come with me. We're leaving. We're going home now. And I had to pick her up and tear her away from the desk, and she would protest, sometimes violently. I did everything I could to make her leave work. And despite her protest, I am, when it comes to matters of procrastination, remarkably persuasive. And so I convinced her to leave. And we parked in the same garage, so we would walk out of the building together, we would walk down to the garage together, and we would say our goodbyes, and I would get in my car, and she would get in her car, and I'd exit the garage, and she would exit the garage, and I would drive the 15 or 20 miles or so to home, and then Laura would drive 2 blocks up back to Salisbury Street, park a car on the street, and go back to work. And the thing is, I never knew it at the time. I didn't know until after she died she was doing this. And all those times, she let me keep on believing what I thought I was doing was right, and she went on back to work, dedicated and diligent. And toward the end of her time with DOJ, she was as sick as anyone I've ever known. And despite being sick as she was, she continued to tend to her professionalism, her integrity, her belief in pride and good work. And at the time, she had been working on a pretty important case, and ultimately had to be finished by another lawyer. And without knowing that Laura was dying, that lawyer reviewed the pleadings and the letters and the transcripts. And she came to me and said, I can't believe what a good job Laura is doing on this case. And that was the thing about Laura, that even in the worst of her days, she was a better lawyer than most of us were on our best days. That was typical of her. She set an example for me and everyone who knew her. She was a remarkable attorney. More than that, she was an extraordinary woman. And we all knew that, not just her colleagues, but her friends, her families, even passing acquaintances. She made us feel secure in our skins, even if she wasn't necessarily sure she was secure in her own. She made us feel good when we were down. She made us laugh, oftentimes hysterically, with tears streaming down her face. And when we were disgruntled or dismayed, she pointed out the goodness in things. When we had delusions of grandeur, she'd give us perspective. She'd let us carry on, but she'd never let us appear unseemly. And when we felt small, she'd even stand next to us to make us feel a little bit taller. She cared for us more than she cared for herself. Laura died on August 16th, and her life was much, much too short. And she didn't do all that she wanted. She didn't get all that we wanted for her. But she never let it be tragic. And in the end, she acknowledged her fate with dignity and composure, encouraging everyone else. And even now, I can hear her whispering in my ear, telling me what to say, how to deliver this memorial. All right, Amar, rule number 1. Let's not make this about you. This is about me. Which therefore leads to rule number 2. Don't screw it up. Be bold, be clever, be inspirational, but for God's sakes, don't be maudlin. The trouble is, I'm not sure I can be those things. Now, if Laura were here with me, I'd have the will and I could see the way because she emboldened me, and she enlightened me. And the truth is, I lack her fortitude, her delightful defiance, her splendid manners. Whereas most of us all too often reveal our flaws, Laura revealed grace. And I miss her. I miss that. And so these days, we're all left content with her memory, to think of her, to say thank you, to say God bless you.
I'm just so honored today to be able to talk about our colleague and good friend, Johnny Kennedy. And I do want to thank all the speakers who spoke at the earlier service we had at the courthouse for John. And they had more time, and they talked about all the different things that John was involved in the community. I'm going to focus a little bit more on how I knew him here at the courthouse. But I also want to thank Mr. McMillan for explaining why it's helpful to write down our remarks, because I thought about that and I couldn't have explained it that well. But I was fortunate to meet John in law school at UNC, and we graduated in the class of 1980. But I didn't really know him well until I spent many years with him at this courthouse on various phases. John was a Raleigh native and graduated from Broughton High School, and he lived much of his life on St. Mary's Street. And he spent his entire professional life, though, working for the betterment of Wake County in the state of North Carolina. And he certainly could have opted for higher paying positions, but he chose to serve the public through the offices he held. He was appointed a Wake County magistrate in the early 1980s, and that was when I really first started to see him, because he had a small claims courtroom on the second floor, and what was then the new Wake County Guardian Ad Litem program was ensconced in palatial offices that had been a jury deliberation room. Got to see John a lot. He had many small claims cases that he heard, and I often would, and as you know, people usually represent themselves, and there's not a bailiff in there. And you might hear people yelling or cursing or out in the halls still arguing after the case was over. But John was always very calm. He heard from everybody, explained his decisions, and tried to calm people down, and largely succeeded. Another role he had as magistrate was performing marriages. So he performed many marriages, and often people would come up to get married and didn't have witnesses. So John would come to our office, or would be out in the courthouse lobby looking for witnesses to witness the marriage that he was performing. In 1985, he was appointed clerk of Superior Court by the colorful H. Pooh Bailey, who we all remember well. And Judge Bailey had confidence in John's ability to serve in that important position, even though he was only 30 years old then. And John was then elected and re-elected to that important position, and he served 16 or 17 years and was re-elected every time. He was well known for his open door policy. John was available to address concerns that anyone had, the public or an attorney. And he truly cared about his employees, and I often observed him trying to help someone better their professional position. But he was also very kind if someone was dealing with a death or an illness in their family, and trying to help them get the resources they needed to deal with the situation, and be as flexible as he could with their job situation. John really lived a big part of his life right here at the courthouse with the employees and the public. When his daughters Kate and then Laura were born, his office, which was then on the first floor, you might remember, it's a tiny little corner, of the first floor. There were balloons and signs celebrating their birth, and we all were able to share in his great joy. And he would mention various achievements of his daughters and how proud he was of them. He was also very close to his parents and built a house next to theirs. And I was telling his mother earlier that when the News and Observer ran an article about his parents' great love affair, he very proudly had it on his desk and was showing it to people that came in his office. He was very proud of his family. And of course later we all shared in his happiness in meeting and marrying Cynthia. That was just a very joyous time for him to marry Cynthia and make Kyle a part of his family. And one time I particularly remember was there was a reception here in the courthouse for an employee who was retiring, and John was just in the midst of a lot of employees and lawyer friends, and everyone was celebrating, and Cynthia, who was sort of a new bride then, was pouring punch and just making everyone feel very much at ease, and it was just a very happy time that I remember here in the courthouse. And John had a lot of responsibility as clerk of court. It just really covers so many different areas of law, but I knew him best as in his role as judge in guardianship cases. Joy Hamilton had served as guardian ad litem in those cases for a while, and when she ascended to the bench, I had a chance to serve in that role in the guardianship cases. And the public doesn't always know so much about that role of the clerk, but I think it's really one of the most important judicial roles in the entire system. The ability to decide whether someone's able to make their own decisions, and if you decide that they're not, to delegate that important responsibility to someone else. I was just always so impressed with John's care and compassion in those cases. He made sure that all the statutes and the rules of civil procedure were followed, but tried to give everyone a chance to state their case, to be heard, and especially for the respondent to be heard, the person that was alleged to be incompetent. He was very sensitive to potential conflicts of interest that guardians might have. Sometimes the respondent their only asset might be a $300 Social Security check. But John made sure that money was protected, and if someone else was appointed to handle that money, that they were responsible, and that they would not take it for themselves, but would actually use it for the needs of the respondent. And if he did find the person incompetent and they were at the hearing, he was so kind in explaining to the person why he was making the decision, what decisions he was going to delegate to another person. And it could really be a really difficult job. I can remember a little old lady that was sitting, just crying because she realized that part of the decision was that she was going to be moved from the house that she had lived in all of her life. And John was very kind in explaining why he needed to appoint someone else to help her make the decisions for her life, and what they would be doing and how the court would be supervising her, or be supervising the guardian. And then on the other hand, people were sometimes very angry and yelling and cursing, perhaps at him, but I never saw him get angry or do anything other than calmly try to keep talking to the person, explain to them what he had decided and why, and give them a chance to understand what his decision was. I guess I saw John almost daily for most of 20 years, and I really found him to be one of the most genuinely kind people I've ever known. And he did this in a very kind way that he never talked about. For example, I had a client who had been declared incompetent. She was an elderly lady in her 90s, and she was in a nursing home in Garner, and she just felt that her money was being wasted by her guardian. And I had gone to talk to her, and her guardian had talked with her about what he was doing, and everybody had reviewed her records, and everything looked in order, but she just couldn't be satisfied. And I told John about that situation with the guardian's permission. And John didn't hesitate to go out and go meet with her in her room at the nursing home and explain to her that he was the judge that had talked with her before at her hearing, that he had reviewed all the records and looked through everything, and that her money was all there. And not only that, but he had the guardian under a bond to protect her money, and that really helped soothe her mind. And that was something he certainly didn't have to do. And I never heard him mention doing things like that or complaining. He often went out of the courthouse to hold hearings so that the respondents could be at the hearing. Sometimes the people were in a hospital, and we held many hearings at Dorothea Dix Hospital, but also he went to Wake Med, to Rex Hospital, even went all the way to Fuquay to when Southern Wake Hospital was there to hold a hearing. One case in particular sticks in my mind. Back in 2000, we had a person who had been declared incompetent. She was just in a horrendous wreck and had been in a coma a long time, but had gotten well enough to go to inpatient care, inpatient rehab, and had progressed to going home and was in outpatient rehab. And her guardian contacted me and said that the treatment team felt like she was competent now, but she was still walking around with a cane or even a wheelchair. And her husband was being treated for cancer. It was a sad situation. But John didn't hesitate to agree to go have a hearing on a Friday afternoon out at Wake Rehab Day Treatment, which was out on Wake Forest Road on a Friday afternoon. It was a mess. But he heard from the medical people there and did decide to restore the woman's confidence, and it was just very important to her and her husband. So that was Friday afternoon. The next Monday he wasn't here. I found out he was having back surgery, and they said, oh yeah, he was in terrible, the people that worked here, he was in terrible pain all week. And he had, I had to have this major surgery. Well, then I realized he was all hunched over in pain during the whole hearing. Never mentioned it. Never ever mentioned it. He had a job to do, and just that was part of the job, was to go somewhere else to accommodate someone else, and not mention his own situation. I just thought that really illustrated the kind of person that he was. He was honored by the North Carolina Guardianship Association for his service as clerk at guardianship hearings, and for his advocacy of legislation and procedures to improve the administration of guardianship statutes, and his assistance in the foundation and work of the Guardianship Association. He also served as chairman of the Clerks of Superior Court Legislative Committee, and he was often called at the last minute to go down and attend a hearing or give some information on an issue that was important to the clerks. He did seem eager, after he'd been clerk for so many years, to address new challenges, and In 2002, he was appointed director of the administrative office of the courts, and he embraced that job with energy and enthusiasm. And he was in a great position. He really knew the needs of the court system and had the skills to bring about positive changes for the court system. And we can really thank John for his tireless advocacy on behalf of the entire court system during his tenure at the ABC. Of course, I can't talk about John without mentioning his great love and dedication to music. And many of you know that he played trombone and bass guitar, but not everyone knew that he was a world-class trombone player. He didn't brag about it, but he had played with lots of famous people and traveled all over the world playing. I'm sure I don't know everybody he played with, but he would just sort of toss off, well, I was called, I'm going to go play with a Motown group at Walnut Creek, or the Dirty Dozen brass bands offered to fly me across the country to play at a concert. I did hear him play with Catherine Whalen of the Squirrel Nut Zippers on a nationally broadcast radio shows. He was at the top of the musical echelon, and he could play anything. He also switched from trombone to bass with ease, and that he was left-handed, which is not an easy thing to do, to play guitar. And thinking about him playing left-handed guitar also reminded me that part of his legacy is there are thousands and thousands of orders that represent thousands and thousands of cases that he tried here that are adorned with his upside-down signature, left-handed signature, that we all would recognize. But he could play any kind of music and didn't seem to need to actually have sheet music. He could play Dixieland, jazz, rock, whatever. He was really, he was a very cool cat. He just really was. He was one person as clerk, and he was just a fantastic musician. And although John was taken from us entirely too soon, he provided a lifetime of service to the public through his legal work and a musical enjoyment to so many through his musical talent. He was truly loved and cherished by his family and friends, and we miss him. And I do appreciate so much the opportunities to be able to talk about John and pay tribute to him today.
Mary Beth Johnston is originally from Roxborough and was a graduate of UNC and Campbell University School of Law, and she practices exclusively in healthcare. She's going to be speaking in memory of Patricia and Meador.
And distinguished guests, members of the Memorials Committee, and family and friends, it's my privilege today to present to you the life and professional career of Patricia Townsend Meador. We also have with us the honor of her husband, Dr. Keith Meador. First, let me say that Patricia would have been extremely honored to be mentioned among the group that we have gathered today to remember. She certainly loved Southern gentlemen lawyers, and she was a mentor to young women lawyers her entire career. So she would have very much appreciated being with this group. Patricia was born on June 8, 1956 in Lansing, Michigan. She was the middle child of Eugene Field and Yvonne Townsend. It probably was inevitable that Patricia would become a lawyer given her family history. Her grandfather served for a time as the Attorney General for the state of Michigan. Her uncles were lawyers. Her father was a very highly regarded trial lawyer in Michigan. And she also showed very early signs of the skills that would be necessary to be an extremely fine attorney. When a junior in high school, she was the state debating champ. She reminded me of that in the heat of argument very frequently. After high school, Patricia had a number of options to attend many excellent universities, and she almost was coached to come to North Carolina at that time, but instead she decided to go to Vanderbilt University in Nashville. As was fairly typical at the time in the late 1970s, Patricia was not particularly encouraged by her family to pursue a career in law, and certainly would have seen from her father's example that if she wanted a family, which was always very important to her, that maybe the practice of law might not be the most accommodating profession in that regard. So because she was good in science, she decided to pursue a nursing degree. But consistent with Patricia's nature, she certainly took all the coursework, and then she decided to go to medical school. Some of her thinking and choices in this regard were altered by the fact that while at Vanderbilt, she met the man who would become the love of her life, Keith Meador, a small-town boy from Scottsville, Kentucky. From the very moment that I became friends with Patricia, I knew for her part that it was love at first sight. And Keith already had plans to pursue a career in medicine, and as she explained it, it seemed complicated to have two people in medical school and doing their residencies in different locales. And so it was at that point in time that Patricia decided to maybe pursue a graduate degree in the law. Patricia was named the president of her class at Vanderbilt, and she graduated summa cum laude in nursing in 1978. Patricia loved to teach and very much enjoyed teaching anatomy, and so when she started law school, her thinking in part was that she would actually just use that as to go back and teach nursing. But Patricia entered law school first at the University of Kentucky and later transferred to the Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville to be closer to Keith, whom she married in August of 1980. She graduated magna cum laude from Louisville in 1982. She often explained that she came out of law school planning to be a tax attorney, but when people saw nursing on her resume, they thought healthcare, and in those days that meant medical malpractice defense. Following law school and Keith's completion of medical school, they moved to North Carolina. Keith started his residency at Duke in psychiatry, and Patricia started her legal career in Raleigh with the law firm of Harris, Cheshire, Leader, and Southern as an associate in their malpractice litigation area. And their offices were right next door in that building. This turned out to be an extremely fine opportunity. Given the size of the firm and their substantial workload, Patricia was given a great deal of responsibility fairly quickly. Harris Cheshire represented the North Carolina Hospital Association Trust Fund, which was a self-insurance trust that provided professional liability coverage for most of all of North Carolina's smaller hospitals. She used to say that it was interesting that in those days, that there wasn't a time that she didn't walk into a deposition in the 1980s that she wasn't assumed to be the court reporter. She spent a good bit of time traveling around rural North Carolina in small hospitals, and she told me frequently that since she was the only lawyer on the ground for the most part, that she began to field all sorts of health law questions. And it was, I think, that experience that caused her to broaden her appreciation of health law and to contemplate what the representation of hospitals generally might entail. One other story from her Harris Cheshire days that she used to tell our associates as she reminded them about the beauty of brevity and clarity in their writing, about the time that she prepared and delivered the most brilliant oral argument in support of a motion for summary judgment in eastern North Carolina, only to have the trial judge interrupt her after she'd gone on for about an hour and said, "Ms. Meador, if it takes you that long to explain your case, there surely must be an issue of fact for the jury. Motion denied." When Patricia became pregnant with their first child, Hannah, she thought maybe she needed to take a change in position that didn't require so much travel. Keith recently reminded me of a story that would have brought that home to her at the time when she realized that her due date overlapped with a jury trial that they were planning, and she moved for continuance, where another Eastern North Carolina judge said, "Ms. Meador, a child is born every day in the state of North Carolina. Motion denied." So it was there around 1985 that she left Harris Cheshire and went in-house at Duke University as medical center counsel. She certainly enjoyed the academic environment, and it's interesting that during that time she also found time to pursue a master's in public health from UNC, receiving that degree in 1989. She was an incredibly rabid Duke fan, and I took great pleasure out of reminding her that the only degree that she had from the state of North Carolina was from Carolina. It was in 1988 as well that Keith and Patricia had twins, John and Catherine. Shortly thereafter, Keith and Patricia decided to move back to Nashville. Patricia had the opportunity to join the distinguished firm of Bassberry and Sims, and Keith had the opportunity to join the faculty at the medical school at Vanderbilt. And it was also a move that would take them back closer to family. It was while in Nashville at Bassberry and Sims that Patricia started down a path that would lead her to national prominence as a healthcare attorney. Nashville has the distinction of having the nation's most dynamic proprietary healthcare markets. And it was there that Patricia's practice shifted from litigation to a healthcare regulatory practice. It was also during that time in Nashville from about 1989 to 1998 that she began to progress up the leadership ladder with both the American Bar Association and the American Health Lawyers Association. Then as fate would have it, and to my good fortune, Keith had an opportunity to return to the faculty at Duke, accepting a unique appointment at the medical school and at the divinity school. While she and her family actually moved back in 1995 or so, Patricia continued to work with Bassberry and Sims, a lawyer way ahead of her time in that she telecommuted with Bassberry for about 3 years. But in 1997, she started thinking about stopping the commute and joining the North Carolina law firm. It was through the encouragement of a mutual friend that Patricia called me one Saturday morning in December of 1997 to discuss the potential of us working together. We began our practice together in March of 1998. For the life of me, I don't know why God decided to smile on me so broadly that day by that telephone call. Immediately, we set out to try to build a quality healthcare practice with more of a national focus. We quickly lured Gary Qualls, an extremely fine and well-known healthcare litigator, and added Kathy Barger, a non-lawyer healthcare consultant, to join us. The four of us formed the senior leadership of a healthcare group, which experienced tremendous growth and success. We practiced together for 10 years until Patricia's death. In 2002, we started the Kennedy Covington Logdell and Heman Research Triangle Park office. Patricia served as the chair of our health care section, and fairly early on in her tenure with the firm, she was elected to the firm-wide executive committee, the first woman to hold that position. She also served on the strategic planning committee for the firm in 2007 and 2008, which resulted in Kennedy Covington's combination with the global law firm of K&L Gates. She was immediately made Health Law Practice Group Coordinator, effective with that combination in July 2008. Simply put, she may very well have been the finest healthcare attorney in the nation. I know that sounds like great exaggeration from her friend on this kind of day, but it is simply undisputed that she was clearly recognized as being in a class of only a handful of lawyers across this land with her knowledge and expertise. You can see the heights she reached within the health law community by her election as chair of the health law section of the American Bar Association in 2000. More recently, she was elected as a fellow by the American Health Lawyers Association, the largest association of healthcare attorneys in the United States with over 10,000 members, having served for several years as chair of its academic medical center teaching hospital committee and having been one of its most sought-after speakers. For over a decade, she was listed in the best lawyers in America in healthcare law. She's been frequently named as a North Carolina super lawyer and among its top 50 women lawyers. I had the privilege of practicing law with Patricia every day, side by side, for the last decade. And I learned a number of things from her. I learned that apparently you can't talk about the state of Michigan without raising your hand and explaining where on the hand you are located. We had another associate who was from Michigan, and you would walk in sometime with them both having their hands up, trying to explain something about Michigan. I learned from Patricia how to think in PowerPoint, which was an interesting new phenomenon for me back in 1998. And I certainly learned to keep a roadmap of the state of North Carolina by my desk anytime that she went off to meet a client. There were so many times that I would get a call from her on her way to Greenville, having found herself in Tarboro. But certainly there's no way to put words to put to words all that she was and all that she's meant to us. For someone who accomplished so much in health law circles, she remained an incredibly unassuming person. She had a tremendous talent of relating to clients. I mean, she had a gift of being able to take complicated legal concepts and boil them down for clients. And she had the ability to make a client feel that their problem was the most important problem of her day. She was, in a phrase, the consummate counselor at law. She clearly believed that the practice of law was a high calling, and she understood the significance of the circumstance each and every time a client placed in her their trust. While I could focus on the times I witnessed her work through hurricanes and trek through blizzards, all which would be true, my most significant observation is that she brought the same degree of focus, intensity, and vitality to her work every single day. Remarkably, not once in all the years that we practiced together did I ever see her not give her all, even in circumstances when she could have gotten away with less. Patricia simply couldn't comprehend the concept, and everyone around her was made better. Patricia was the personification of excellence. But the qualities I remember the most are first that she was a person who dearly loved her family. While that's true of most people, Patricia held them particularly close and held them dear in every sense of the words. And she was so exceptionally proud of Keith and Hannah and John and Catherine. Patricia was a very loyal person, constant, faithful, and she probably was the most charitable and forgiving person that I've ever known. But she also had a great capacity for fun and for friendship, which is evidenced by the number of people who have been affected by her death. As I continue to search for clarity in this time, I find comfort in the knowledge that she was a person of faith, and she taught me to trust in providence. The other comfort I have is that Patricia loved what she was doing, and she really enjoyed the health law team we had assembled. Patricia was asked in a firm survey in 2006 to answer this question: what would you do? What would you want others to say about you the day you retire? She wrote that I had a clear vision, a steadfast commitment, and was a true friend, and someone capable of wise counsel. She accomplished that and so much more. Patricia packed more living and established more relationships in 52 years than most of us can possibly dream of doing in twice the time. I will count it one of the great blessings of my life to have known her and practiced law with her and to count her as one of my closest friends. I've worked very hard over these last months not to try to skew the memories of our time together in more idealistic terms than they really were, because I think that will unnecessarily lessen the glow surrounding the real wonder of her marvelous life. In the end, Patricia will best be remembered for her abundant life. Sometimes, when I'm able to pierce through all of this, I think how good God has been to her family and to me and to the others that worked with her to give to us for our everyday someone of her caliber and goodness. How good God has been. Amen. Thank you.
I'm not going to reintroduce Robert McMillan, but come forward and tell us about the life of John. Much detail as you.
Please go. Justice John Webb. Since the summer of 1933, I have known and loved John Webb and his extended family. For 8 years, my brother Archie and I spent our summers in rural Scotland County at the McMillan home place with our 3 maiden aunts, who in my mind had no earthly reason for existing beyond that of making life pleasant for me. This they did to a marked degree. Facilities were non-existent, but the food was scrumptious. The waters of the Lumbee River, in which we spent most of the daylight hours, were clear and cold, even on the hottest days of August. There was even a tennis court, one of the first in the state. John Webb and his family spent their summers with numerous kin in a nearby cottage during this same era, enjoying the same bare but idyllic existence. Not until the outbreak of World War II did this sharing of mutual joys cease. It happens that I spent the afternoon of December the 7th, 1941, in the Webb home in Wilson, North Carolina, listening to the radio broadcast of the attack on Pearl Harbor, a place of which none present had ever heard before that day. Ever since those times, my contact with Justice Webb and his family has been intimate, gratifying, and inspirational. He was educated in the public schools of Wilson. He was active in all school activities, including playing on the Charles L. Coon football team. He played with heart. I ceased there. And developed a keen interest in athletics at all levels. He evolved into one of the statistic nerds who could cite batting averages, earned run averages, football yards gained, passes completed, and the like. Immediately upon graduating from high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, serving honorably throughout the remainder of World War II. After military service, he entered UNC Chapel Hill, at which institution he amassed an exemplary record scholastically and in the full life of the university. He completed his formal education in the Law School of Columbia University. Following graduation from law school, he practiced law in New York City for a while before returning to North Carolina with an assignment with the Institute of Government at Chapel Hill. Thereafter, he practiced law in Wilson with Russell Curry. The two of them, in due course, took in a young aspiring lawyer named James B. Hunt, Jr., a name with which some of you may be familiar. Following several years of general law practice, Justice Webb was appointed to the Superior Court bench by Governor Robert Scott. He thrived in this position, enjoying the travel, the variety of cases, camaraderie with the bar, and local political leaders across the state. Governor Hunt appointed him to the Court of Appeals. He served for many years in this court, forming bonds of friendship with Justice Burley Mitchell and other members of the court. He was particularly well suited for this position due to his skills as a legal scholar. Thereafter, he ran for and was elected to the state Supreme Court. This position, too, was appealing to him, calling for the high caliber scholarship of which he was so capable. In addition, being on the Supreme Court was following the family tradition set by his paternal great-uncle, Chief Justice William A. Daly. In life beyond the realm of the law, Justice Webb was very active for many years. He taught an adult Sunday school class in the First Baptist Church in Wilson. He also served as a trustee of the Baptist State Convention. While he was actively involved in other civic activities in Wilson County, he never lost interest in athletics, nurtured in his youth. He was an avid fan of school teams in Wilson and the activities of Atlantic Christian College, now Barton College, and the municipal teams. He took great civic pride in reminding all and sundry that a Wilson boy named Jack Davis was the star fullback on Wallace Wade's greatest team. Furthermore, he could tell you all about the days of the Big Five, when Davidson was still a member, with Stan Yoder and Tina Lafferty starring and our mutual friend Poss McLean playing. During his law school years, he learned the lore of Columbia's teams under Coach Lou Newman and his greatest stars of Sid Luckman and Paul Garbonelli. Never losing the Tar Heel touch, however, he pointed out that Columbia went to the Rose Bowl many years ago with their star back Cliff Montgomery, not Montgomery Cliff, whose brother Harry Montgomery was a running back for the Tar Heels. He was a booster of all activities of the teams at UNC Chapel Hill. Seldom, if ever, did he miss a home football game. He knew football, basketball, baseball, tennis, and all the rest. Justice Webb epitomized the term a gentleman and a scholar. All of us knew him as the ultimate gentleman, walking with kings but serving the masses as peers. He was a scholar of law of the first rank. He was a scholar of literature, English and American. His knowledge of the Bible and the development of the Judeo-Christian concept was truly remarkable. Apart from these areas of scholastic expertise is the fact that he was the best informed person I have ever encountered with respect to the lifetime and accomplishments of Sir Winston Churchill. Justice Webb, as was true of all persons who lived through the days of World War II, was a great admirer of Sir Winston. Justice Webb's scholarly research into the life of this great man was astounding. His grasp of the magnitude and significance of Churchill's accomplishments was simply magnificent. Those of you who may have known him only as a casual acquaintance need to be advised that he had a wonderful sense of humor. He loved to laugh. His cousin and bosom pal, Charles Franklin Lambert Jr., could reduce him to paroxysms of uncontrolled laughter. Rising to a point of personal privilege, I recount an anecdote which enabled me to get a chuckle from Justice Webb whenever I saw him as long as he lived. One summer when we were boys, Charles Lambert, John Webb, and I took about a paddle boat trip down the Columbia River, into the Little Petey River, into the Great Petey River, into Winyah Bay, and ultimately into Georgetown, South Carolina. Since I was the oldest, John's mother cautioned me, quote, "Don't let John get wet." If he gets wet, his asthma will start acting up. End of quote. With tongue-in-cheek, I assured her that we would keep John dry. We had no shelters beyond cotton blankets. During the first night of the trip, a frog-strangling rain fell. I was the first to get up the next morning. John was lying on his back in spread eagle position, lying in 3 inches of water, with his mouth wide open, and rainwater washing into his mouth and nostrils. Yet, he snored on until I awakened him for rat cheese and sardines for breakfast. We made it to Georgetown in 9 days of such weather and rations. For the rest of his life, whenever I saw him, I would inquire of him, quote, "How is your asthma?" End of quote. With a roaring laugh, he would respond, quote, "Just fine. You cured it." As lawyers are given to say, quote, let the record show, quote, how much I love and love Justice Webb and his entire family. His devoted wife of many years, Carolyn Harris Webb, predeceased him. He is survived by Sister Flora W. Plowley and her husband and their children. And Justice Webb's surviving son, Will, is a lawyer here in Raleigh. His surviving daughter is Caroline Smart and her family of Colorado. His brother Archibald Webb and his family of Florida also survived. About Justice Webb and all of this family, it can truly be said that to know them is to love them. It is my great honor to have been asked to make this presentation. Never have I had a friend more dear than John Webb.
Presentations, that was some of the best we've ever heard. Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank the members of planning, Jernigan, and the members of the committee for the fine work you've always done. As you've heard, the passing and gavel of the Clark Brewer. This will be the last time he puts this all together, and then we want to personally thank you for all the good work and your personal strong commitment to this program, which has been so good and so good for us over the years. Thank you very much. These are always special moments, and you feel good when you leave. At least I do, and I think probably all of you do too. I think that the lawyers that we honor today would no doubt want us to remember that this memorial service is not only an occasion to honor them, but it's also perhaps an occasion when we can reflect upon what we as lawyers hope we're about, what we as lawyers hope may be said of us when our names are read in a courtroom in a ceremony such as this. The late Pat Pope, who practiced law in Harnett County and Lee County for many, many years before his death, and he was a really wonderful speaker on the topic of ethics at CLE programs for lawyers. Had a quote about the kind of lawyer that he thought each of us should strive to be, and I'm going to read that to you and finish up here. But Pat would read the following, as I read it now: a great lawyer is a person whose self-control is equal to all emergencies, who does not make the poor man conscious of his poverty, the obscure man of his obscurity, or any man of his inferiority or deformity, who is himself humbled if necessity compels him to humble another, who does not flatter wealth, cringe before power, or boast of his own professions or achievements, who speaks with frankness, but always with sincerity and sympathy, whose deed follows his word, who thinks of the rights and feelings of others rather than his own, and who appears well in any company, a man or woman with whom honor is sacred and virtue is safe. I believe that those words aptly describe the people that we have honored here today. Although they passed away, we, by our presence, promise that we will keep their memories alive. Stand, please. In honor of Hunter Spencer Barrow, Heman R. Clark, Laura Gendy, John N. Kennedy, Patricia Townsend Meador, and John Webb. Sheriff, please adjourn the court. Sign it down.
Yes, sir. This Honorable Superior Court, special setting for the County of Wake now stands adjourned. Sine die. God save this state and this honorable court.
Thank you. You're dismissed.